guys, so in this video today I'm going to show you how to pick up and do an afterthought heel. So this is an afterthought heel where you have already knit a line of scrap yarn as a place where your heel will be. So to do so you need to have your finished sock, and it is best to have already finished the toe or cast off the cuff. So you want to have technically a finished sock just minus the heel. You're going to need a pair of needles. It doesn't matter if you're going to be using circulars or deep ends, whatever way is your preferred method. However, with doing an afterthought heel, it is easier, especially for the first time, to try and do it using magic loop. Just means you're not going to have as many stitches sliding off each side of a DPN. Wool needle, yarn, you can either do a contrasting yarn for the heel if you like that sort of thing, or just use the same yarn that you have already been working with. And a pair of scissors. So the first step is to pick up the stitches that have been put on hold technically with the scrap yarn, and then undo the scrap yarn. So you have two sets of live stitches again on the needles. So I generally like to put one hand on the inside of the sock, and think of it as in you're going to be picking up stitches again. So you're looking for where the little V of the knit stitches are, but you're not going to be trying to pick up the scrap yarn, you're going to be trying to pick out the stitches, the row or round below. So make sure you get all of them, and you don't want to get the ones over here that have been knitted. You only want to get the focus on the ones that have been worked with the scrap yarn. So you just pick up the first one. So you're just going to go along and pick up each of the stitches. In your pattern it will tell you how many stitches that you need to have picked back up on the needles. In my patterns I do say how many stitches you need for each needle, but you can just do some basic maths and work it out. So you just want to go along and pick up each stitch, making sure you're only going to be getting one leg of the stitch. So how I've just picked up this stitch, leg, I'm not going to go and want to pick up this again, because technically that means you're just making the needle go under it, you're actually not catching the yarn. So if you've got it like this, how you've got both legs of the stitch on the needle, when it comes to undoing the scrap yarn, you're going to technically drop the stitch. And you can pick it up, but it just makes it a bit of a hassle. So you only want to be going through one of the legs per stitch. So you can see here on the next stitch that this here is a leg, and then this here is a leg. So you're just going to choose one of the legs, and I always just naturally try to go for the leg closest to me. So you pick up one of the legs, skip a leg, and then move on to the next stitch. Skip a leg, so you don't want to be picking up that one, you want to skip that one and go on to the first leg of the next stitch. And you are going to continue picking up stitch as one leg of each stitch across all of the stitches that have been caught or knit with scrap yarn. So you want to do that to the very edge. And with this, how it's caught the scrap yarn, you're going to want to undo that because you don't want to have the scrap yarn caught. So I've just picked up across and I've come to the last stitch, and you can tell it is the last stitch as I've picked up the leg of the row below for this stitch, and then you can see how there's a little V for this one up here, and then I'm just going to pick up the leg. And if I pick up both legs of the stitch, which you don't want to be doing, but I'm just going to show you here, that means this little V is in line with that one, and there is no more that needs picking up. So of course I just want to drop the second leg and just have the first leg. And that is the first side of the heel picked up. So now that you've got all the stitches on the one needle, you are going to now turn the work and pull the needle through, and then pick up stitches underneath for the next side, just like you did for the first. Sometimes with doing the second side it's a little bit harder to see, as it looks like there's only one half of a leg. That means you're just going to want to pick up just as you have been in the stitch below. So even though this one looks like it doesn't necessarily belong, but as you can see, this pink here with this so like the creamy colour, that is one that there looks like one stitch. So you're just going to want to pick up the leg of the stitch below. So you can choose to pick up the first stitch like we have been doing, or if you feel more comfortable, you can pick up the second stitch, which is directly below the pink. But with doing it either way, with the first or the second leg of the stitch, you are just want to go straight into the next. You're going to want to go straight into the leg of the next stitch, skipping the second leg and going into the first stitch of the next. And you continue that all the way across. And it's exactly the same for coming up to the last stitch. It looks like there is only, it's half used again, but also good guide is to see what stitch has been from the previous row above the scrap yarn as below. So a lot of the time that also give you a good indication. But you can see how this little bit of pink yarn here is actually going in for the stitch here. And that is where you are just going to pick up the first leg of that. And then a good way to make sure it's right is to actually check that you have got even amount of stitches on both sides of the cord or needle, depending on how you're going to be holding it. For this one, I've got 28 on each side, so I know that it has all been picked up correctly. And that kind of gives you a bit of a look how it should be looking. So then you're going to want to take your wool needle or tapestry needle, whatever you normally use for weaving in ends. You can also use a spare DPN needle or another set of circular needles with just using one of the needle tips. But all you're going to be doing is just you're going to undo, or I guess you could say unpick the scrap yarn. So you just want to go in where the V is and you're just going to pull it. So it's just a little bit fiddly, and you can do it with your fingers, but I do find with using a needle you can get in there and pull it out. It's just so much easier to do. So you can see how they've got each V, so you're just going to go into like the first leg of the stitch and give it a gentle pull. Sometimes they can be a little bit tight, but you just give it a good pull. If you find it too tight, you can sometimes try by slipping the needles out so you are just on the cord, and that can sometimes make it a little bit easier, as there is not as much, I guess, tension in amongst stitches because the cord is thinner than the circular needle tips. So you're just wanting to do each leg of a stitch at a time. If you try and pull the whole leg, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just like if you've got a knitted garment and you've pulled it, it's just going to pull a stitch out and kind of look a snagged, uneven tension. So you are going to have to do each leg at a time. And of course, these stitches, as you can see, because they've been caught on the needle, they're just live stitches again, and you're not dropping stitches, you're not losing anything, it's all staying there nicely secure. So you just work your way across. If you're finding it taking quite a bit to pull all the yarn through with the needle, you can just snip it closer, because often with the scrap yarn you won't be using it again. But if you do want to save the scrap yarn and use it for another project, you don't want to cut it, of course. But that just makes it a little bit faster, as you're not having to pull so much of the scrap yarn through every time you're pulling it. So do that until you've got it all undone. So now all the stitches are back live on the needles, and you can turn it around and pull them onto the needles, and then you are ready to work the Afterthought heel as instructed in the pattern. So that's sort of showing you just this in, you've done the leg, you've done the foot, and now you're putting in the heel. So then it will actually sit like a proper sock. And then you follow the instructions that are in the pattern on how to do the Afterthought heel, joining in your working yarn. So just a quick tip, when you're doing your working yarn, you want to leave a bit of a tail. I would say about that much, as that allows for you have enough yarn when you're going to weave in your ends. Just join in as you normally do.